pretty much everyone is going to be against the Holocaust after the Holocaust. How did you respond to the Holocaust during the Holocaust? Any idiot can recognize evil as evil in retrospect. The important thing is to call it out when it's happening right in front of you, while you are living under the repressive system that is perpetuating the oppression. If you can't do that, it's meaningless. It's your silence will allow the evil to persist. Our collective silence will be part of that evil. And the embarrassing thing, the humiliating thing for Zionist genocide scholars who have created their entire identity around the victimhood of the Jewish people in order to justify the creation of the Jewish supremacist apartheid settler colony of Israel. The embarrassing thing is these professionals didn't anticipate that they would one day be considered the experts who everyone is waiting for to make the call about whether Israel itself is committing its own Holocaust now against the people of Palestine. It committed a Holocaust against them. In Arabic, we call it the Nakba, when they ethnically cleansed Palestine when Israel was first created. But now it's committing another one right before our eyes, live streamed, everyone can see it. And the humiliating thing for these professionals is they have made a career out of talking and thinking about genocide. But the reason they did that, here's really the problem, the reason they did that is not to prevent future Holocausts. No, the reason people uh, often specialize in Holocaust studies is to fixate on the Holocaust of the past so that they can use the Holocaust, the atrocity of the Holocaust, to preemptively defend anything that Israel can ever do. Because that's like they've put their entire identity into the existence of Israel. So recently, genocide scholar, and this is the humiliating thing. It doesn't take a scholar to acknowledge that the genocide in Gaza is a genocide, that Israel's treatment of Palestine is the most atrocious, evil thing that the modern world has ever seen. It's cartoonishly evil. It gets worse every day. You can't make this stuff up. The aid massacres of the starving people, the dismemberment of children, it's at such an exaggerated level, and it gets more exaggerated every day, and it goes on for so long where literally 100 civilians, Palestinian civilians, largely children, are murdered by Israel on a daily basis, and others are tortured in prison, terrorized by Israeli settlers in the West Bank and given full immunity, no accountability whatsoever. It's like the most hellish apartheid system, the most obvious example of ethnic cleansing and genocide in the modern world. And every oppressed population can easily look at the situation and identify with the people of Palestine. So why can't the Jewish people who have been through a Holocaust identify with Palestine? Well, a lot of them can, and they're amazing. People like the Jewish Voice for Peace. They say that whose ancestors are Holocaust survivors, and they can look at what Israel is putting Palestine through and recognize it and call it out. The reason I'm making this video is because a so-called genocide scholar in the New York Times, who last year published a genocide denial article basically saying, oh, what Israel's doing might be bad, but let's not call it genocide. Let's not go that far. And it's like, why did you write this article? If what Israel's doing is evil, why are we arguing semantics? Who is this helping? Evil is happening. Let's stop it. Well, now it's so much time has passed that it's become very humiliating for such so-called genocide scholars. It really sounds sarcastic when I call them that by that title. It's become humiliating for them to basically fail to acknowledge what Israel is putting Palestine through, because again, a child could recognize it. So it's really embarrassing for them not to be able to call it what it is anymore. It's become too obvious, too uncomfortable, and they're going to lose all face if they don't call it what it is. So now this same so-called genocide scholar has published another article saying, I was wrong. Actually, this is a genocide. I see it now too. And yes, I can tell you with all of my years of profession that this really is a genocide. Wow, thank you, Mr. Brilliant. That's amazing that you came to that conclusion after your article was used to repress activism against the genocide for so long. Thank you. Your professional title was used to justify the repression. And now you come out with this article. This is published in the New York Times. Go to newyorkwarcrimes.com if you want to see a compilation of the way the New York Times has manufactured consent for the genocide. They are so complicit in this. It is unbelievable. The New York Times and all of the mainstream corporate Western media are perpetrating the genocide with their words by lying to people about what's happening right on their screens, covering it up, using convoluted logic and beautiful words to hide the truth and give people permission to believe the more convenient versions of the truth instead of acknowledge that they might be complicit in this. And so now this genocide scholar says, I tried so hard to not call it a genocide because like my identity is so intertwined with Israel and I served in the IDF and yada yada yada. Okay, we don't need your personal backstory, man. It really doesn't matter. You're basically just admitting that your ego prevented you from calling evil evil, which would have been bad enough if you were just a random citizen. But no, you're a journalist with a huge name and a huge platform, and you used that platform and you used your professional title to create a like to create credibility basically for an opinion that what Israel's doing in Gaza shouldn't be paid attention to. It's not that big a deal. It's complicated. Let's muddy the waters. That's what you did. And for you to now slowly reckon with and come to terms with your own identity and why you did that, and that's not good enough. I don't care about your egotistical backstory about why it was hard for you to accept a genocide as a genocide when you are a genocide scholar. I'm actually going to do you one further. You, the genocide scholar, are committing the genocide. You have committed the genocide by by being a central pillar upon which the empire is allowed to justify the genocide to its public. And in a so called democracy, like the West claims to be, justifying their evil deeds to the public is a big part of the game, right? So they can get away with doing what they're doing. And so then in democracies, inherently, it seems, journalists will turn to lying. They become the liars for the politicians, and that's their job, so that the government can keep doing whatever it wants and spreading its empire in the white supremacist way it always does. And yes, Jewish supremacy is a form of white supremacy. The Jewish colonists, the colonizers, are from Europe. Even if they had experienced their own injustice in the past, that does not give them the permission to then go ahead and perpetrate ethnic cleansing against other people who are indigenous to their land of Palestine. Shame on all of you. And while you were busy making this about you, genocide scholars, in the space between the two articles where he denied the genocide and then he admitted to the genocide and talked about why it's so hard for him to admit, while you were busy making this about you, in the space between those two publications, hundreds of thousands more Palestinians have been murdered by the state of Israel. And your words provided the cover necessary to accomplish that feat. Now that we are approaching the era in which the genocide has been going on for so long that it's become really uncomfortable to deny, even if it's inconvenient for your identity to acknowledge, a lot of people are going to start coming out of the woodwork, right? And they're all going to start making disclaimers and hedging and saying, hey, maybe I was too hasty. We were wrong. The EU has started to do some of that, some of the people in the EU. We're not going to take it. We're not going to forget where you stood on the genocide during the genocide, which is still ongoing. And if anyone thinks I'm being too harsh on him, after all, he is criticizing Israel and he is acknowledging the genocide now and he is saying something needs to be done about it. And even before he called it a genocide, he did say something needs to be done about it. Here's my problem. He is still, even in the newer article, using language that glorifies the state of Israel. He is still centering the experience of the oppressor, and he is still framing the timeline of human history around October 7th. The Zionist perspective for him comes first, even when a Holocaust is being committed in their name with their money, using the cover that he created for them in the mainstream media. Pretty much everyone is going to be against the Holocaust after the Holocaust. How did you respond to the Holocaust during the Holocaust? I saw an interesting quote online the other day. A liberal is someone who is against every war except the current one, and for every civil rights movement except the current one. And I thought that's very accurate. And I don't want to be reading essays and watching documentaries decades from now about how horrific this all was. And I don't want to be hearing that from people once it's safe for them to come out and say things and say the obvious because it's no longer politically risky for them to do so. Your words are meaningless if they are not backed up by actions. And they are also meaningless if they are adding to the noise and they're not actually creating change. You could have said something to make a difference. I remember when that first genocide denial article came out, by the way. He decided to make a very negative difference with his words. It was even worse than adding to the noise. And frankly, I don't care about the sincerity of his updated article. I think he's trying to save face because it's humiliating, the position he has taken. Um, it has really not aged well. Not that it was ever remotely acceptable, but it was devastating at the time. It fed into the repression of the beginnings of the Free Palestine movement in the United States, and again paved the way for the subsequent murders of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians. But Palestine is still standing, and inshallah, it will always be standing. So, the difference we're talking about, what I'm fighting for here with this video, is to make the point that while the genocide is ongoing, and I continue to check the news every morning, and I continue to see that roughly 100 civilians in Palestine are murdered by Israel every single day, as long as that reality persists as it has for months, and as the genocide has continued for 2 years, and as the military occupation of Palestine has continued for 76, 77 years at this point, as long as we are still living in the hellish moment, it's not too late to speak out against it. Not in the way this genocide scholar has done, not in the way where he makes it all about his ego, his identity. The identity of the privileged oppressor is irrelevant right now. And they can talk about that in their own little dinner parties and things. I don't care. But when you are facing the public as a professional, and hundreds of thousands of people have been murdered in your name, and hundreds of thousands more people will be murdered if you don't step up to the plate. Now is the time to come out full force, free Palestine, full force. Israel is a Jewish supremacist settler colony. It never had the right to exist. I was wrong for my unhinged insistence that the right of a state to exist should take precedence over the right of a people to exist. And unless people come out with that full force recognition of the evil of the Western Empire while the Western Empire is committing its genocide, they are saying nothing. They are serving their ego with all of their attempts to introduce nuance into their former perspectives. And anyone who didn't stand with Palestine over the past 2 years, I wouldn't want to be you on the day of judgment. Political work that matters, in my opinion, is not the political work that will make you feel good about yourself. It's not the political work where you'll be seen in a positive light by society. It inherently alienates and ostracizes you from society. If you have something to say that society doesn't want to hear, if you have something to say that will actually introduce change to a corrupt system, your society is going to reject it because your society is built on that system. So the feel good activism of liberals is worse than meaningless. It's damaging, and it convolutes and confuses the real work that needs to be done right now if you are privileged enough to live on a plot of earth that is not being bombarded. If you are privileged enough to be the one whose tax dollars are contributing to a genocide rather than the one who is fighting for your life through a genocide right now. As more and more people come out of the woodwork and start acknowledging Palestine, and they might use these nuanced terms. Oh, look, I support Israel, but we also have to see Palestine's perspective here. None of that language is going to be acceptable. To those of you who used to be genocide deniers, those of you who identify with Zionism and you're scrambling to find a way to continue to make that a part of your identity and ego without being hated by society for being pro genocide, um, you have to change your motivation. Your motivation shouldn't be to save face with society. Your motivation needs to be that you actually want to look inside your soul and do the right thing. And if that's your motivation, then maybe it's not too late for you. And that's between you and God. Allahu alam. But if you wait until Palestine is free to start saying free Palestine, then I don't know if the blood will ever wash off of your palms.